Prashant.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Neelam, ma'am. Thanks for this wonderful introduction. And thanks a lot for having me in this faculty development program organized by the Department of Political Science and Public Administration, Annamalai University. Before I start my talk, I would request all my learned peers, please don't fix me in the parameters and circumference of a resource person. I've always been student and would love to remain student throughout my life, and take me as an ordinary participant who's just trying to put forth his thoughts and ideas during some interactive session of a seminar or webinar or symposium or some informal academic discourse of your institution. At the outset, I would like to congratulate the Department of Political Science and Public Administration, Annamalai University in general, and the convener of this FTP, Professor C. Subramaniam, Professor and Head Department of Political Science and Public Administration, Annamalai University, and Dr. J. Subramaniam, Dr. Neelam Pandey, and Dr. S. Balamurgan, co-conveners of the program in particular. And yes, Professor P. Shaktivel, if he is there, Professor and Deputy Controller of the Examinations, Annamalai University as well. You have preserved your energy and enthusiasm in this extremely difficult time and organized this FTP on this very significant and relevant topic. My kudos. सूर्य पथ पर आंच सहने की सदा तैयारी रखें, हो सके कुछ शुभ शुरू तो फिर उसे जारी रखें. That means always be prepared to endure heat if you travel to the sun, and continue the good work if it's started. All the best, Political Science Department, all the best, convener, co-conveners, and everyone involved. Excuse me, just a minute, just a minute. Neelam ma'am, please don't mind, I didn't offer you the drink. Actually, I am having right now, it's not tea, coffee or anything else. Just lukewarm water with a few herbs as cinnamon, black pepper, basil, raisin, and dry ginger. And as I have told you, I've been getting uncomfortable with mild sore throat and congestion in my lungs for last few days. So much that 2 days back, I was sure that I would be well enough to speak and be a part of your program. But with God's grace and this decoction of some herbs that I have mentioned, and having steamed several times in a day, I am with you. But you have to bear with me.
No problem.
You have to bear with me, as I'll have to keep sipping this mixture periodically to continue smooth functioning of my throat. So
absolutely no problem.
Thank you, ma'am. So well, congratulations once again. The initiative you have taken will guide and precede several faculties, institutions, and universities. Apart from the relevance of the topic, such orchestration of the useful academic discourse is quite essential for interpersonal relationships too. Because all the acquainted ways and means of living a normal social and interactive life have been virtually irrelevant in this COVID-19 scenario. We used to meet people, we used to be social, used to share our stories, and thus we used to develop a bridge of vibrant relationships by sharing lively stories. This facility is not available for us, at least at present. Sigmund Freud had observed way back, probably in 1896, man's life is always trapped in a dilemma between freedom and responsibilities. And most of the people are frightened of responsibilities because their freedom might be compromised. If they accept responsibilities, now we can understand this dilemma with regard to freedom and safety in this threatening period of COVID-19. As you step out to feel your freedom or enjoy your freedom, you compromise your safety. And as you enhance your safety, shutting yourself within the four walls of your house, your freedom gets compromised. This situation demands that we must devise certain ways and means to connect to each other. And this effort of yours could prove to be extremely productive, particularly when several participants would benefit from this FDP for career advancement purpose too, apart from the other respective objectives like enhancing the knowledge of your subject or developing communicative skill or whatever. As most of the UGC, HRDCs and other teacher training colleges are temporarily closed and not offering offline courses, and uncertainty and unavailability of MOOCs, massive open online courses, referred in UGC regulations 2018, is also a big concern for college and university teachers, whose promotion under CAS Career Advancement Scheme is due in near future. I hope that this FDP will ease their worries a bit. Excuse me. When Dr. Neelam Pandey ma'am informed me about the FDP, and I came to know that I'm supposed to interact with you on the repercussions of COVID-19 on Indian society, economy, and education as the virus expands footprints globally. Initially, I thought to focus on only one of these three issues, as my concern was lest my words, my thoughts fall apart. Such a large expansion of society, such a broad scenario of economy and education. But when I started serious deliberations, I started realizing all these three aspects that seem to be separated are in fact interrelated and intertwined. You can't disseverance them at all. For instance, take education and society. You won't find any dividing line between education and society. You can't imagine a society without education or education-less society and vice versa. The development after 1990 in the context of the economic liberalization, impacts of economy are quite visible on every aspect of our lives. Globalized economy and capital explosion have created a market of education, or you can call it education of market too. Apart from that, whether we like it or not, economy has influenced almost every facet of society, be it literature, culture, food, vesture, even social relationships too, that seem to be influenced by the economy. Hence, even a minor aspect that affects one of these three demeanors, directly or obliquely, has a bearing on the other two as well. Therefore, we'll have to ponder over these aspects in plenary, and a holistic approach is the need of our, as our discussion proceeds. As a matter of fact, COVID is not a petty issue at all. They say it might prove to be humanity's biggest crisis. Today, when we have gathered online to discuss the new world order during or post COVID-19, the world has reported millions of cases and deaths as well. Pandemic has shown its devastating impacts everywhere in the world. Public health strategies such as social distancing and washing hands regularly have been widely discussed. But it's apparent even these simple strategies have been a privilege many could not afford around the world. We have realized so far that the pandemic is going to have broader social and economic impacts across the globe. For example, in South Africa, a large section of households, roughly more than 13%, might not have access to running water. Neelam ma'am, can you hear me clearly? Feel free to interrupt you whenever there's some problem with my voice.
Yes,
If
sir.
it's
Your voice is audible, sir.
okay, thank you. So in South Africa, large section of households, roughly more than 13%, might not have access to running water, let alone other facilities and tools to cope up with disease. You could include a number of Pan-American and third world countries in this list. While the virus does not discriminate on the basis of race, sex, and borders, it's most likely that it will disproportionately affect the poor. If not in form of infection, definitely it will affect it economically, as it's affected the poor migrant laborers in India, and millions of them had to lose their livelihood. The pictures of those migrant workers carrying their children on head and walking hundreds of miles will keep haunting us till memory fades and life departs. I'll focus on this great social, economic, and human crisis of migrant workers in some detail a bit later. But now the big question is, where this history-altering event, this outbreak of COVID-19, will take us socially and economically. And what would be its repercussions on education as well? Developing countries like India is struggling hard for gaining access to effective ways and means to fight COVID-19 and face its aftermath, have by and large realized the importance of discussing COVID's social, cultural, and economic impacts. These countries very rightly view the pandemic not merely as a concern of the developed world, but as something that is going to change them as well in a big way, socially and economically. In facing such a crisis, it's highly desirable to know exactly what one is hoping to achieve, as it's in all great undertakings. If this can be clearly seen, then the best way of getting to work usually becomes evident. Therefore, to consider carefully what we are of the pandemic and lockdown to on society, economy, and education, particularly on Indian society, Indian economy, and education of India. Keeping an eye though on changing world order. Coronavirus has shaken the very roots of the world economy and world trade. Many experts, many commentators believe that it's an outcome of hyperglobalization and might be a beginning of deglobalization and might be the starting point of new world order. though I believe it's too early to come to this conclusion. However, in these circumstances, some major changes are inevitable. As mentioned by Professor P. Shaktivel in his lecture on 23rd of June, three-time Pulitzer Prize winner and the author of the famous book, The World is Flat, well-known American political commentator, Thomas Lawrence Friedman says, there is the world BC, before Corona, and AC, after Corona. We have not even begun to fully grasp what this after Corona world will look like. But what kind of world, what type of society we want or we need must be discussed at least. I mean, on last Friday probably, or maybe a week earlier, Amitabh Bachchan and Ayushmann Khurrana starrer film Gulabo Sitabo was released on Amazon Prime. Those who welcome so-called new normal may describe it as an unprecedented event and say, now look, we are heading towards that new normal in our society. But the truth is that Corona has started changing the character and face of our society. Disasters do not kill only humans. They also hurt the faith and character of people. The initial 3.5 months of this disaster has started to change the face of our society, which is more than 5,000 years old. Let me give an example. In early May, I think, a woman and her child were sitting and crying on the middle of the road in front of Sector 18, which is the heart of Noida's business activities. What happened to her was embarrassing. Her husband's job at a factory was lost due to lockdown. There was not even a single brain in the house for several days. After walking several kilometers, she reached one of her relatives. And after a lot of nerves, a lot of pleading, somehow she gained rupees 5,000. She was returning with her son when two raiders on a motorcycle raided her and snatched her money. The multi-story buildings standing around and the silence you normally had on the highway was teasing her pain. This is not the only case of snatching a morsel from the mouth of another hungry person to satisfy one's own hunger. Last month, more than half a dozen such snatchers have been caught in the country's capital, New Delhi. They had nothing to do with the crime by the end of March. Through a small job they used to live, stripped of their employment in lockdown, they could not find any other way to satisfy their family's hunger. They became snatchers. Those who worship the balance sheet of companies like religious scriptures may keep saying whatever they like. Actually, we are heading towards a new abnormal in the society. Its prediction is currently impossible. Anyway, how can people descending on the slope think of heights? I've just hinted that some political experts believe that we can expect some change in the globalized world. Actually, globalization is in many ways a new form of economic colonialism and represents the success of ravenous capitalism. Developing countries, including India, that have often suffered the negative consequences of this globalization, have virtually no or very little role in defining the rules of the game. Globalization is the basis of increasing capitalism That is an economic system in which the government play a secondary role and countries' trade and industry are controlled by private owners for their profit. Globalization and capitalism are inherently tied to one another. Though capitalists would claim that the system is fair enough, as one attains the reward of one's own hard work, yet factually, capitalism fails to create equality. Equality of outcome, equality of opportunities, and equality of social justice. And inequality leads to social division. Capitalism means that the economy is market-based. And in the market-based economy, there is no value of human beings. In this scenario, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused an unprecedented human crisis. Past pandemics too have had disproportionate impact on socio-cultural, economic and political fabric of the world, be it plague or Spanish flu or Asian flu or H1N1 swine flu or West African Ebola epidemic, Zika virus, or many more similar epidemics or pandemics. And the COVID-19 outbreak is proving to be no exception. Those with the lowest paying jobs and the fewest financial resources are most susceptible to the adverse economic and social effects of the pandemic. All of us have heard the story countless times about India's 3-decade-long economic miracle that propelled it from being an isolated backwater to a global powerhouse and one of the largest economies in the world. And hundreds of millions of people have managed to escape poverty. What we have heard less about or haven't paid enough attention to is deeply unequal and exploitative system of megacities centered on low-wage migrant workers from rural areas that has fueled much of the country's economic growth. These migrant workers who make up almost, we can say 1/3 of the population have been made second-class citizens and locked out of the huge windfall of India's rapid development. Migrant workers play a distinct role in capitalism. They are considered as a reserve army of labor, as a means of raising the rate of exploitation. These migrant workers have always been the victims of exploitation. Adding salt to their injury, COVID-19 and subsequent lockdown have presented a horrible picture of exploitation. Suffering of these migrant workers had been on the rise since the announcement of lockdown. They walked home for hundreds of kilometers. Kids died while returning. Many working on the ground have told me that the suffering these lesser privileged are in is insurmountable. I would quote a Hindi poem of Devendra Surjan here. Ma'am introduced me and she hinted that I would quote some Hindi poems or Hindi lines as well for the benefit of Hindi speaking participants. And definitely I would translate it into English too for my non-Hindi speaking friends too. But that poem shook me in, and I would like to share this poem. गई रात अपने बाकायदा उधड़ चुके पैरों से अपना अधूरा सफर करते बिना मजदूर आए. Last night, the unnamed laborers came on their unfinished journey with their cracked, bleeding feet. जिनमें तो कुछ इतनी दुधमुही बच्चियां कि चलना भी नहीं सीख पाई थी, वे अब भी अपना अंगूठा चूस रही थी, और कुछ तो इतनी बूढ़ी कि चलने तक से लाचार। वे हर कदम पर फटी विवाहियों में कंकड़ चुभने के चलते अब भी चीत्कारें मार रही थी। Among them, there were some very young baby girls fed on breastfeeding who could not even learn to walk. They were still sucking their thumbs, and some were too old to walk. They were still screaming at every step due to pebbles in their cracked chaps. कुछ गर्भिणी जो अब भी सड़क किनारे जन्मे बच्चे की नाल काटने के लिए नुकीला पत्थर खोज रही थी। कुछ वे जो निकली तो सुहागन थी पर अब बेवाएं हो चुकी थी। Some pregnant women who were still looking for a sharp pebble or stone to cut the placenta of a child born on the road. Some of those who started their journey with their husbands, but now they are widows. फिर नरकंकाल आए कुछ, जिनमें से किसी का सर था तो किसी का पैर आया था, कोई भी पूरा ना था। जाहिर था कि मरने से पहले इंसान थे, पर बेनाम नहीं, कि उनके माथों पर किस मालगाड़ी से कटे ये पता खुदा था। Then came few human skeletons, some of whom had their heads only, and others had their feet only. None was in whole one piece. It was obvious that they were human beings before they died, but not nameless. The address by which good strain were they cut off was inscribed on their foreheads. ये सब आए और इनके साथ और भी बहुत आते ही गए, पूछने की कहो कहां जाएं हम। They all came, and with them others kept coming, and came with them to ask where to go now. दरवाजों पर थाप इतनी भयावह थी कि उठ बैठा हुक्काम पसीने से तरबतर, बदहवास। फिर उसे याद आया कि आज नींद की गोलियां खाना तो भूल ही गया, और हुक्काम ने नींद की गोलियां खाई और आराम से सो गया। Knocks at the door were so frightening that Hukkam, the king, sat up, sweating and getting frightened. Then he remembered that today he had forgotten to take sleeping pills. Probably that's why these nightmares. And Hukkam gulped down the pills and fell asleep comfortably, ignorant of knocks and cries anymore. The poem is really heart-wrenching. The agony of migrant workers and our apathy towards them, both are piercing. Now, many of these migrants have reached their places, but with no work, no salary, and no hope whatsoever. We are all acting happy that the migrant laborers have reached home after months of desperate longing and suffering. But deep down, there is little happiness. They are mostly reaching home penniless and may need to return to their labor sites in a month or two. And if they find work, they'll think themselves lucky. This is a society where some are grievously poor and need to slave for others who are well off. That's how the machine runs. Anyways, what I have seen working a bit as a member of Roti Ghar, they have absolutely no means to feed their children, let alone nutritious food. During our Roti Ghar efforts to feed children of these migrant laborers, we could easily observe that the undernutrition is highly prevalent among children, even if they somehow get to have food from somewhere. Lack of dietary diversity, poor hygiene and sanitation, and of course, economic inability to seek health care are further affecting their nutritional status. Parents' loss of work is exposing children to a nutritionally challenging environment. Their undernutrition must be paid attention to, and it must be done immediately. Needless to assume that poor migrants could include dairy products, coarse grains, variety of vegetables, meat, and fish to their children's meal themselves, which is absolutely essential for their nutrition and healthy future life. Policies and programs seeking to address the crisis of employment too must be paid attention to the specific needs of these migrant workers. In such a crisis, a financial crisis, it will be something like living in utopia, that these poor migrants could suddenly be entrepreneurs and create jobs for themselves, as some of our experts suggested during this FDP and on other forums as well. COVID-19 as an economic crisis raises various questions, not only related to individualized physical survival, but also about the structural patterns relied on weakening of welfare state. The situation raises some hard questions that all of us need to answer. As an individual, as a government, and as a society. An action plan must be created to reskill unemployed migrants. It's high time to broaden our sight. However, another important question is how states will hold economy without these laborers. Production and employment were only possible with the help of their physical contribution. In fact, they were the backbone of the state's economy. According to Economic Survey 2018, there are nearly 14 crore laborers in India of coronary or cyclical form. And they've contributed in all the three sectors of economy: agriculture, industry, and service. Without these laborers, economy's backbone is bound to break. Now, humongous migration of these laborers is a reality, and it has left its footprints on Indian economy. Then what's the road ahead? Should we wait things to be normal and expect these workers to return to the cities where they had migrated from? Or should we need to redefine and restructure our model of development, where urbanization has always been the only picture of development? Can we dream of smart villages instead of smart cities? I think we'll have to read Gandhi's Gram Swaraj once again and try to assimilate it if we really believe that the soul of India exists in our villages. We'll have to revamp our village-based economy. Now we can manage employment there and revamp it through agriculture or agriculture-based small-scale industries or cottage industries as the labor force is available in our villages. We must acknowledge that despite our lopsided emphasis on industrialization, agriculture sector is still on top as far as employment generation in India is concerned. Economic Survey 2018 denotes that agriculture sector generates more than 50% of the total employment in India and contributes always almost 17 to 18% to Indian GDP. However, the sector has been the most neglected one in terms of infrastructure, in terms of limited marketing options, in terms of scarcity of cold storage required in case of excess yield, in terms of rural transport system, so on and so forth. Apart from agriculture sector, due to the collapse of our entire economy of workmanship too, the country's rural markets have been badly affected. It's estimated that there are about 16 million workers in India who are involved in works like sewing, embroidery, weaving, etc. These workers live mainly in rural India and are a part of that complex process of our textile industry, which is rarely noticed by the world. It's a large number in terms of number force, and these workers are a very significant part of our skilled labor force. I've got this information from very capable masters of this field who've been a part of our society for centuries. The Indian fashion industries has progressed significantly over the last 2 decades. And unlike the rest of the world, it has special team of native designers. This team has not only those who are seen on ramp, but also a part of this team are workers who live in villages, weavers, embroiderers, and artisans. Much of the Indian designer clothes and their glamorization must be attributed to, in fact, these weavers, embroiderers, and artisans, which is not done, unfortunately. Due to the pandemic and due to the poor condition of this field, it's very important that the government takes some initiative on this sector, this field, on its own behalf, as it did in 1950s to save the country's handicrafts. Today, the world uses very advanced machinery in the production of clothes. And its effect we can see in the case of Banarsi sari. Chinese products have ruined the handloom market of Banaras. After the pandemic, there will be a serious livelihood crisis for the workers of this field. The question of intellectual property crisis is ahead in the commodity sector. The government should come forward to encourage startups in this field. Handcrafted clothes may be better produced in rural agricultural backgrounds. It doesn't even require much investment in infrastructure or skill development. If it happens, this will be our only made in India by hand brand in the world. Hence, it gets essential while discussing repercussions or aftermath of COVID. We must focus on our agriculture, handicraft, weaving, embroidery, etc. to boost our village-based economy. In doing so, we'll be talking about solutions to most of the social and economic problems. Besides, by far the biggest negative effect of industrialization is on environment. Pollution is the most common byproduct of industrialization. The degradation of ecological systems, global warming, greenhouse gas emissions, and the adverse effect on human health have garnered widespread concern. I heard Dr. Vedanta Desikan while he was introducing the topic on first day of the FDP, suggesting that the impact of COVID-19 on environment could have been included in the list of subtopics. He also mentioned that only positive of this pandemic could be seen in the fact that the condition of environment has improved a bit during the outbreak of COVID and subsequent lockdown. But to celebrate, it's a very temporary. Yes, climate experts predict that greenhouse gas emissions could drop to proportions never before since World War II. This outcome is mainly due to the short-term social distancing policies adopted by the governments following the appearance of the pandemic. For example, in Hubei province of China, strong social distancing measures were implemented in late 2019. These measures affected the country's main economic activities. As a result, power plants and industrial facilities halted their production. Also, the use of vehicles decreased considerably. All this led to a dramatic reduction in the concentrations of nitrogen dioxide, NO2, and particulate matter that have a diameter of less than 2.5. We call them PM 2.5 in the main cities of China. In other parts of the world too, such as Europe, air pollution has noticeably reduced since governments ordered citizens to stay at home to contain the spread of the coronavirus. Main industries as well as other regular activities have gone to a halt. For instance, the use of cars has reduced, which has caused CHGs to decrease. Also, the social distancing measures adopted by most governments have caused many beaches around the world to get cleaned up. This has happened as a result of the reduction in waste generated by tourists who visit the beaches. Likewise, noise levels have fallen significantly in most of the countries. Again, the decrease in the use of private and public transportation as well as commercial activities has caused a reduction in noise as well. But remember, once things get normal with all the commercial activities, materialistic development and rapid industrialization, all the cars and other vehicles on the road, we'll be back to square one. It means that this temporary phase won't work. Solution to environmental issues is somewhere else. Again, we'll have to turn towards Gandhi. An often quoted statement of him: the earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed. Gandhi had cautioned the world much before any modern day environmentalist about the problem of large-scale industrialization, which we are confronting today. Gandhi visualized that mechanization will not only lead to industrialization, to massive urbanization, to unemployment, but will also lead to the destruction of environment. The Gandhian idea becomes still more relevant when sustainable growth and development is to be achieved, because he emphasized on production by the masses instead of mass production. According to him, this will result in the development of an economic system that can minimize environmental degradation and achieve sustainable development. We can't find the permanent solution to environmental problems with the help of lockdown and social distancing. That's the thing. Another concerning social issue that needs our attention during this pandemic is a sudden spike in the cases of domestic violence. Studies of National Legal Services Authorities, NALSA, suggest that this could be as high as 80 to 90%. Even WHO indicates that there is 60% increase in the cases of domestic violence all over the world. In India, Uttarakhand has registered the greatest number of cases in last 3 months. Then comes Haryana and then Delhi. Many women had been facing domestic violence, verbal and physical abuse, even during normal times as well. But the lockdown aggravated the situation. Incidents of domestic violence against women have gone up since April, and the trend continues in May and June too. Though home may be considered a safe place for some, yet unfortunately it's not the safest place for all. And COVID-19 lockdown proved to be a period of a surge in the cases of domestic violence. NCW has raised an urgent alert about the domestic violence in India. The terminology lockdown is itself quite overwhelming and gives a sense of being trapped. This, compounded with stress, may lead to the perpetrator projecting frustration onto the victim to a higher degree. However, why to blame only lockdown? Unfortunately, women have suffered discrimination and violence in their homes more often than not. Sometimes it seems that the male authoritarian society has coined this term wife to serve and bear its bullying for centuries. I teased the famous feminist poetess Himani Banerjee in graduation, who says in her poem Wife, and I quote, "I often think of this thing called a wife. What's she? But I cannot for the life of me, I cannot see a woman a person. When I call conjuring her out of the air, wife appears. I say what appears is not human, but a monolith, a granite form to whom centuries have lent their strength, shape, and color. And she is molded into the shape of a house, a cave house. This is a fearful construction. I cry. I pray for an earthquake to splinter this rock, this granite monolith, a mere form built by the male hands of history. Well, not only women, no, children too have increased amenability to domestic violence during this time. Increased stress levels, anxiety, job insecurity, financial worry, and other such emotions of parents can be predictor of abuse. It's critical that helpless individuals are protected at this time. It's our responsibility. the responsibility of society. And as far as education is concerned, the impacts of COVID-19 on education too has been a big and very important issue of discussion. As schools and colleges have been closed for months now, and this condition may last for next few months as well. But I think we don't need to be in haste to tamper with educational structure post-COVID as far as the traditional mode of classroom teaching is concerned. I want to clarify, I'm not against technology. But technology takes its own sweet little time to settle. Traditional face-to-face classroom teaching has an age-old tested structure that has endured upheavals of centuries with its sheer strength only. In the words of legendary Hindi poet Jaishankar Prasad, यह नीड़ मनोहर कृतियों का यह विश्व रंग कर्म स्थल है परंपरा लग रही यहाँ ठहरा जिसमें जितना बल ठहरा जिसमें जितना बल है. That means this world is karmic, based on action. Survival of a person or of a system depends on its own strength. And our face-to-face classroom system has shown that strength for centuries. We'll have to understand that education is not just providing contents. It's not a soulless learning. It also includes how to develop interpersonal relationships, how to get engaged in co-curricular activities, and above all, how to be a better human being. And all this can be taught through traditional face-to-face teaching. Yes, during this COVID-19 period, we may try online teaching as an alternative because we don't have any other option. But the way online teaching is being projected as a substitute for the traditional classroom teaching really disappoints me. If you analyze online courses already offered by various private educational agencies on different platforms, you'll find that dropout rates are higher in these online courses. Many students don't keep up with course activities. They slip further and further behind until they would rather drop the course than keep up. Availability of devices required, laptops, Android mobile phones, computers, it's a huge concern. Are schools, colleges, universities, or governments in a position to provide each student with these facilities? Moreover, requirement of these devices with a stable internet connection, which is a luxury, in fact, among most of the rural population, will always be a problem. In the country which has the highest number of internet shutdowns in the world, an online-only system is bound to have some serious challenges, even among us, the people who can afford broadband connections and laptops. Lack of time structure is another major issue. With traditional courses, students go to the classroom, learn what they need to learn, are reminded when projects or assignments are due, etc. They have their classmates and friends around them talking about the work. Online is different. Students might get emails or WhatsApp or Telegram messages, but the cues are less noticeable. Easy for the cues to vanish into general online noise. In a traditional classroom setting, a student has live face-to-face interaction with the instructor or the teacher and fellow students, which keeps him motivated. In an internet-based class, however, there is no live contact with the teacher and classmates. The student works alone in a virtual environment. This lack of live contact may lead to a feeling of isolation and make it difficult for a student without high internal commitment or personal drive to stay motivated during the whole course. But even beyond that, many parents are skeptical as they feel that the additional screen time that this online education requires, excuse me, so it's a great concern that additional screen time that is needed during online education. A fact that can't be overlooked is that obsession with gadgets in children may pave the way for behavioral and psychological disorders in future. As per a guideline from the American Association of Pediatricians, children between the age of 5 to 10 years should not be permitted screen time of more than 1 hour per day. And for those above 10 years, the duration of exposure is to be fixed by the parents, who also need to act as a media monitor. Children had already been over-engaged with the gadgets. All of us know. We always remember our childhood with a sight. The common sight during the vacation was of children playing around in parks and playgrounds during their vacations. The current scenario has been unfortunately shifting from playgrounds to AC rooms with children glued to their phones or tablets. And experts believe it sends out a warning signal for society. Excessive use of gadgets overexcites the brain. Cell phone with backlight puts lot of stress on children's brain. With continuous uses of gadgets, the brain gets drained out, resulting in memory problem in the long run. And it also causes poor educational performance. The graphics of the gadgets change so rapidly that they fully engage the brain. Children gradually get used to such high levels of stimulation that they expect the same from all media. In the later stage, books fail to provide the same level of stimulation, eventually resulting in poor academic performance. The prolonged use of the gadgets makes children restless and agitated. We'll have to acknowledge, if for a moment we do assume that online teaching is the future of Indian education, the future hasn't arrived yet. Even if we want to disturb some old age, well-established system and replace it with some new one, we'll need a comprehensive study for that before thinking about the implementation of online education. The other day I came across a news. Uttar Pradesh Basic Education Department will adopt online teaching. And all the teachers have been instructed to take online classes. I don't know how to react. If it's an attempt to register the presence of the department, then it's okay, go ahead. There is a competition among various departments, that are not directly involved in fight against corona to register their presence. They want to be seen doing something. If it's the sole purpose, it's okay. But if the department is really serious, it will have to face and address this question: what's the roadmap? 80% of the UP basic education schools are in rural areas. And I think there are some FDP participants from Uttar Pradesh as well. And they would endorse the fact that most of students are from comparatively weaker economic background. Do these students have the required facilities to go ahead with online education? If they do have, what's the use of midday meal scheme started in 1995? Believe me, I've seen the ground reality of these schools, children and their parents. If midday meal scheme along with free books and school uniform distribution schemes is withdrawn from these schools today, 50% of the parents won't be able to send their wards to schools, and massive dropout is inevitable. Even in secondary schools and even in UG, PG colleges, condition is not entirely different. I don't know exactly the ground reality of other states, but I can just guess that it must be, by and large, similar to that of Uttar Pradesh, with minor variations here and there. So if we really wish online education to coexist with traditional classroom teaching, we'll require a long-term planning. We'll have to train our teachers and students who haven't been technology savvy, address their problems, especially those of availability of required means, connectivity, etc. It may take years or decades. We'll have to be patient enough. Can't impose online teaching forcefully without adequate preparation. Online teaching might be considered as a complementary means, definitely not as a substitute for face-to-face classroom teaching. And I would also request my fellow faculty members joining us from different colleges and universities in this faculty development program to provide exact data of their online teaching when they report to their higher educational authorities, to present the real picture of online education. Please don't inflate the figures just to be in good books of the authorities. If we have been constantly showing that 80 to 90% students have been attending online classes, accessing e-contents when they actually they are not doing so. Everything is fine with online teaching, and it's not. And mark my words, in future, our very relevance will be questioned. Yes, sharpen your professional tools. Use technology wherever it's needed, particularly in this COVID time. But save your existence too. Advocate to save our schools, our colleges, our traditional classrooms. That's the need of our. So now, how to coexist with coronavirus as a society? Lockdown is again being discussed here. I guess it's been enforced in Chennai already. But we must understand, no country can afford a prolonged period of lockdown. And at least of all, a country like India. A team of researchers at Princeton University and the Center for Disease Dynamics, Economics and Policy, a public health advocacy group based in New Delhi and Washington, has identified India as a place where fight corona without lockdown strategy could be successful, because its comparatively young population would face less risk of hospitalization and death. The impossibility of social distancing in crowded living conditions, like in many cities and villages in India, the lack of testing kits to detect infections, and the human suffering that occurs in lockdowns suggest a different path may be needed in these places. Moreover, 85% of COVID-19 cases do not face any issue except a mild fever or cough. 10% require hospitalization. 5% need oxygen support. And right now, more than 70% declared cases in India are asymptomatic, meaning they face no difficulty in their day-to-day life. Remember, tuberculosis, TB, kills more. Most of India lives in a tiny room with 4 or 5 members, sometimes more. The space is too less to practice social distance. Isn't social distancing the main idea of a lockdown? With every passing day of the lockdown, I was increasingly feeling convinced that lockdown is a luxury term for people who have a decent house with separate drawing room, separate bedroom, a proper kitchen and bathroom, with enough money in pocket to last for a few months, with an internet connection to stay entertained. Coronavirus does not kill everyone who gets it. India has always been a country with comparatively stronger immunity. Our lifestyle is such that it enhances our immunity. We practice fasting, we eat more vegetables, less processed stuff, we get drenched in the rain, and we eat out in unhygienic conditions on the streets, among many others. You can just add, dozens to this list. I supported lockdown till May 3rd, with an understanding that the government would stand with the poor, with the migrant daily wagers, who are the worst affected. I somehow feel that the government has, by and large, failed. Not just the central government, but the state governments too. If there's no lockdown, they may die. But with lockdown, they will definitely die. If not die, they'll suffer immensely. For the urban mass, which includes me, our suffering is not able to eat out or go out for some fresh air. For the poor, luxury is now rice and water. 80% of India's economy is informal, which means most receive wages on a daily basis. And right now, they are without one. Sincerely hope that instead of another lockdown, government comes up with practical possibilities to end the suffering. The panic has brought simply too many lives and livelihoods to a grinding halt. We need to fight that panic. Wear mask, wash hands, sure, as much as you want to, but buy flowers from the women sitting on the pavements. They are as fine as the vegetables we buy and cook. Get clothes stitched by the roadside tailors. They need our custom. Go and give to the beggars on the temple road. Too few people are there for them today. Allow the vendors into your gated complexes. They also need to earn. We who can afford to work from home need to remember that many cannot. Some basic precautions are in place. Okay, good, fair enough. But more than that is destroying those on the edge. No, don't fuel the fears. It's not necessary. From the first day, some of my fellow volunteers have been out almost daily to the flower vendors, to the beggars, to the roadside tailors. Our friends of Roti Ghar have been out with the migrant laborers on the roads, in the stations, guiding, feeding, directing, encouraging. They are all well. It's okay to be a cog in the wheel. Everyone cannot be the spoke. And some of us will be cogs, will have to be cogs. Been one throughout my life myself. It's important, however, to intelligently choose the wheel moving in the right direction. A song from Hindi movie Udaan has always inspired me to face tough time with smile, and would like to share with you, translating it into English again for my non-Hindi speaking friends. चढ़ती लहरें लांग न पाए, क्यों कांपती सी नाव है तेरी, तिनका तिनका जोड़ ले सांसें, क्यों हाफती सी नाव है तेरी. In a sort of defiant tone, the singer begins. Unable to scale the rising tide, why is your boat out of breath? Why is your boat measuring those gasps of breath one at a time? रख देगा झकझोर के तुझको, तूफानों का घोर है डेरा. भंवर से डर के जो हार मान ले, काहे का फिर जोर है तेरा. है दिल में रोशनी तेरे, तू चीर डाल सब घेरे. लहरों की गर्दन कस के डाल दे फंदे रे. कि दरिया बोले, वाह रे पंथी, सर आंखों पे नाव है तेरी. है दिल में रोशनी तेरे, तू चीर डाल सब घेरे. लहरों की गर्दन कस के डाल दे फंदे रे. कि दरिया बोले, वाह रे पंथी, सर आंखों पे नाव है तेरी. It will rattle you. So strong is the storm's foundation. But if you are defeated by the wind, then of what use is your valor? You have the glow inside you. Is the time now? Break the dark shackles. Grab the waves by their throat and harness them, so that the ocean says, "Oh great traveler, I salute you." And I will end my talk, my dialogue with this positivity. In the words of Bhavani Prasad Mishra, ये किसी निश्चित नियम क्रम की सरासर सीढ़ियां हैं, पांव रखकर बढ़ रही जिस पर की अपनी पीढ़ियां हैं. बिना सीढ़ी के चढ़ेंगे, तीर के जैसे बढ़ेंगे. These are sheer ladders of a certain order. Our generations had been climbing up with the help of these ladders. But now we'll climb without a ladder. We will move like an arrow. You heard me with so much patience. My sincere thanks. Once again, my heartfelt gratitude to the Political Science Department of Annamalai University for giving me this wonderful, wonderful opportunity to talk to you. You all stay safe. I pray to God for all of you. Thank you. And if we have some time, Dr. Neelam Pandey, we can take some questions from our participants to ensure mutual communication. You know, participants, you can also drop your question in chat box, but I would suggest you send me your questions in my personal inbox rather than sending them to everyone, as your question might get lost in plethora of messages there. I'll try to get your questions and reply them to the best of my capacity. Though my fatigue due to congestion of my lungs is getting heavy on me, yet I try to address some of your questions. Please go ahead with your question. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Prashant. Really, I appreciate you that with such a serious health problem, you have serious sore throat, but you are bold enough, as you ended with the poetry, no, you are following that also in your life, and you spend wonderful thoughts you have shared with us. It was really, I was touched, no, so far we were just presenting statistics, but to feel about migrants, their pain, their suffering, the poor people, this you have shared because you are a man of literature. I think you feel more close to them. In that way I take it. Even in my house, no, there's some domestic health. They are also not worried about corona. They are worried about their work. They are worried that there is no rice, how to manage my life. They are least bothered about corona. They are bothered only about their livelihood, and that's the reality. So participants, dear participants, you can ask your questions to Dr. Prashant, and he's available to answer them either through chat box or by raising hands also. Shivnesan, you can read the question. Shivnesan, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You just read some question for Dr.
Now I
Prashant.
unmuted Sagar, ma'am.
Huh?
Now I unmuted Sagar, ma'am.
Hello?
Sagar, huh? Sagar, you can ask.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Yes, Sagar, go ahead.
Excellent speech, sir. I'm Sagar from New Delhi. I want to ask, I want to touch a topic related to education. Sir, you know, there is a reservation for EWS people, economic and welfare section people, where we reserve the education for the lower income group, SC and ST. So these people get a reservation whosoever having a lower income group in the private school. You also know that in CBSE schools, as a free of cost, no fee till the 8th class, free of books and free of dresses also till the 8th class. And these people from slum areas, auto people, everyone is getting an opportunity to study in a higher school like Sanskrit, where all the bureaucrat people are studying, where the Mount Carmel, DPS, Delhi Public School, these people get the admission from, slum people get the admission in these schools, get a brighter future. And so we should, as a perspective, as these kinds of policies, we should implement in other states where we can make our people better, and a forthcoming future people can also get a better future in the competitive world. How do you think this?
Thanks, Sagar, for this wonderful question. Though your voice was not clear and I couldn't grasp everything that you said, but somehow I got the point that it's about the discrimination in education, and probably that was your question, and how it should be addressed. And I've already mentioned that the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed how rooted structural imbalances are between rural and urban, male and female, rich and poor, and probably you donated discrimination among different castes and communities. And they are rooted even in the digital world. A major challenge of remote learning is disparity in access. From electricity and internet connections to devices like computer or smartphones. Yes, another point, access to electricity. I've just reminded of that. It's crucial for digital education, both for powering devices as well as for connecting to the internet. While the government's Saubhagya scheme to provide electricity to households shows that almost 99.9% of homes in India have a power connection, the picture is less luminous. If we look at the quality of electricity and the number of hours for which it's available every day. Mission Antodaya, a nation-wide survey of villages conducted by Ministry of Rural Development in 2018-19 showed that 60% of India's households received 1 to 8 hours of electricity daily. 33% received, 9 to 12 hours, and only 47% received more than 12 hours a day. It shows that most of the rural areas don't have enough power supply needed for online education. As far as reservation is concerned, I'm not the right, I don't have expertise. But what I believe that there must be equal opportunities to all, and particularly as far as education is concerned. And that's why I said, in fact, problems are numerous with online education, because it will create that gap between the rich and the poor, and between the privileged and the underprivileged class. Yes, during lockdown, we may use it just to get students engaged, whatever number they are available in. But our well-tested conventional classroom teaching will have to be sustained just to provide equal opportunities to every student of the society.
Thank
I
you.
think I think you have got your answers, Arun.
Concept was not against the discrimination. It was about the opportunity I was talking. मैं हिंदी में बता देता हूँ, voice clear नहीं है तो.
Yes, go ahead.
मैं ये बोल रहा था, voice clear है सर अभी?
कट के आ रही, but I can hear you. Please go ahead.
हाँ, मैं ये बोल रहा था, जैसे हमारे प्राइवेट स्कूल्स में जैसे संस्कृत स्कूल, डीपीएस स्कूल वगैरह जैसे है, जैसे ऑटो रिक्शा पीपल्स या जैसे झुग्गियां पीपल्स रहते हैं, तो उन लोगों को हम रिजर्वेशन देते हैं इकोनॉमिकली वीकर सेक्शन।
दिल्ली गवर्नमेंट
दिल्ली गवर्नमेंट देते हैं फ्री ऑफ कॉस्ट में स्कूल की सारी मतलब फीस से लेके बुक्स और आइदर एड्रेसेस उनको पूरा प्राइवेट स्कूल्स में दिया जाता है। तो ये सिस्टम हम लोग बाकी स्टेट्स में अगर इम्प्लीमेंट करेंगे तो बच्चों को जो है ब्राइटर फ्यूचर बनेगा करके मैं बोल रहा हूँ। तो ये स्टेट और सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट को इस चीज के ऊपर वो फोकस करना चाहिए करके मैं बोल रहा हूँ। तो इसके बारे में आपकी पर्सपेक्टिव क्या होगा करके मैं पूछ रहा हूँ।
नहीं, बिल्कुल फोकस करना चाहिए और हमें सजेशन भी देना चाहिए। When we prepare the outcomes of this FTP and we must communicate to the respective governments of our states. And अगर वो equal opportunities दी जा सकती हैं तो डेफिनेटली हर जगह देना चाहिए। प्राइवेट स्कूल्स, हालांकि प्राइवेट स्कूल्स भी आपने सुना होगा कि एम जितना कर रहे हैं उतना दे नहीं पा रहे हैं, बट एटलीस्ट एक इनिशिएटिव लिया गया है, एक शुरुआत हुई है। और जब हम लोग चर्चा करते हैं वेबिनार्स में, इन एफटीपीज में, तो उनके जो हमारा एक निकल के आएगा इसका रिजल्ट, इसका आउटकम, वो हमें करना चाहिए। और मेरा पर्सपेक्टिव तो हमेशा ये रहेगा कि जो भी अंडर प्रिविलेज्ड है, जो भी जिनको अपॉर्चुनिटीज नहीं मिल पा रही है किसी वजह से, उनको मिलना चाहिए, उनको देना चाहिए। और व्हाटएवर वे पॉसिबल, if we can provide these opportunities to the underprivileged, we must provide.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Most welcome. And I have got Neelam ma'am a question in my chat box.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yes, can village-based economy develop our country, India? Again, sure, I can't claim expertise in economic affairs, but as a layman who keeps an eye on economic affairs with an inclination towards sympathy for farmers and simple villagers, I can say that there is, to be sure, no iron laws of economies which says that an economy has to go into manufacturing into a big way if it's to rise up the ladder of economic development. But modern industrial history does not furnish us with examples of large labor abundant economies that have been able to do it any other way thus far. In fact, India lives in its villages, and development of villages will be critical if we want to close the gap between the haves and have-nots for a better human development. It won't be easy. simply because villages aren't in the priority of our policymakers. As Gandhiji himself said, I know that the work of shaping the ideal village is as difficult as to make of India an ideal country. But if one can produce one ideal village, he'll have provided a pattern not only for the whole country, but perhaps for the whole world. More than this, a seeker may not aspire. So we'll have to focus on our village economy if we want permanent solutions to the sufferings of migrant laborers or these poor villagers, etc.
Prashant, if you have any question in your personal chat box, you can take. Otherwise,
Now I think
we can wind up because
yes. Now
because you are yeah.
Yes,
It's
it's
time
4
also.
o'clock and
It's time. Yeah. So thanks a lot, dear participants, and we should really thank and encourage Dr. Prashant because he's very sick. I can see that through and through he was drinking something and trying to make us clear and all. So we wind up our session, very useful session today. Thanks everyone, thanks all the participants, and we'll meet tomorrow again at usual time, that is the 10:30. We'll have another session, useful session. We'll meet tomorrow. See you then. Goodbye. Bye and thanks everyone.